The Labour Party under Sadiq Khan, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and others is mounting a secret racist campaign against the children and young people of this country. They're doing it by ensuring that they are thrown out onto the streets and instead replaced with people who have no right to be in the United Kingdom, the bogus asylum seekers from countries like Somalia, Eritrea, Iraq, Iran, and indeed our favourite, Albania. In this video, I'm going to go through exactly what this secret plot's about, exactly what's taking place, and I'm going to explain to you how we are now going to receive probably the worst thing we have ever had in terms of immigration. Remember, we started by ensuring that social housing went as a priority to immigrants who don't deserve to be in the UK. Now we are moving on to the private rented sector and actively evicting people who are British nationals in favour of immigrants. Apparently, the Home Office say they have a duty of care for these destitute migrants coming to Britain. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all of my videos as soon as they are released. Well, okay, let's first of all explain a little bit of background to all of this. I will say to you that I think the most important thing children and young people can have is a stable home life with a proper, decent family. That might be an unfashionable thing to say these days, but I genuinely think it is true. And we as a country should be standing up for the family. We should be standing up for mothers and fathers and indeed for a stable home life. And a stable home life means a whole variety of things, doesn't it? But one of the things that's most important is having a home of your own. Now, I've been incredibly frustrated with social housing because we've seen the way that social housing goes to recent migrants. Now, people will say to you, it doesn't automatically go to migrants. Well, what happens is, on the social housing list, there are two criteria. There's the amount of time you've been on the list, and secondly, but more importantly, it will be your category, and that category is based on need. And the people who are most needy are mothers with young children who have nowhere else to go. They are, in practice, principally from immigrant communities. And so what it means is that when new social housing is built, your local community has to pay for it, but the benefit effectively goes to Pakistan, Somalia, or wherever these people have come from. I will say one thing about immigration to this country, asylum seekers. If you think about it, had there been a genocide in Ukraine, had there been a genocide in Nagorno-Karabakh, had there been a genocide in Gaza, then actually we would have been unable to take refugees from those places simply because we would have had so many fake refugees that we would have had to have left those people to be killed where they lived in their streets. That would have been an absolute shambles. And can you imagine the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh where it didn't happen, but where there were fears that there would be a genocide against the Armenian Christians? And imagine if we were unable to house genuine Christian refugees because fake asylum seekers from the Islamic world had come instead. Can you imagine the evil and the hatred of that? Well, I'm going to say now what's happened. First of all, social housing goes as a priority to recent migrants. We all know that. But now what is taking place is that the government is forcing local authorities, and the Mayor of London is forcing local authorities to get people evicted from their normal privately rented homes in order that they can move migrants in. I first became aware of this because I was moving to a particular development in Windsor, and people said, oh, you want to avoid that place, it's going to be full of asylum seekers. I said, what do you mean it's going to be full of asylum seekers? They said, oh, you're not going to believe this. What has happened now is that the council has started leaning on private landlords to give people no-fault evictions in favour of bringing in asylum seekers. Now, why would these landlords do it? Well, let me explain why. First of all, this no-fault eviction is about to disappear. You will have to keep people in your home if you rent it to them as long as they keep paying the rent in the future. But right now, as it stands today, you can evict people for any reason or no reason at all. You just have to give them the requisite level of notice. Well, what that means is that this is an opportunity for the government to ensure that private landlords are able to throw people out, British people out, in order to move asylum seekers in. And by God, are they doing it in some significant numbers. And why the landlords do it is this. Because, first of all, the government will give you more rent than you would get on the commercial market. Next, what they'll do is they will give you they'll refurbish everything at their expense, change light bulbs, repaint walls, redo kitchens, whatever it is. The migrant themselves could virtually burn the place down, and the government will continue to pay for it and indeed refurbish it at their own expense. And the money is paid directly into your bank account. Now, I will say, one of the big problems that happened when Tony Blair came in was they changed the rules. Previously, people on housing benefits, that housing benefit was paid directly to the landlord. Now what happens is it's paid to the tenant, who is supposed to give it to the landlord, but may or may not do that. In the case of migrants, you will be paid directly. So I think it's fair to say that whilst we've all got our principles and we all want to do the right thing by the country, nonetheless, I can see how landlords would want to take the government's migrants instead of ordinary British people. And also, let's be honest, the property world is full of some of the least savoury people you'd get outside of used car dealing. I don't mean to be rude to used car dealers, and indeed there are people in the property business who are decent, but we know also there are a lot of sharks in that business. And actually it's very similar to what's happened with hotels. Because I've got an example of a little village called Datchet next to Windsor. If you ever get a chance to go to Datchet, it's absolutely gorgeous and there's a real nice community spirit to the whole place. And they've got a hotel in the middle of it called the Manor Hotel. Now, I know it quite well because we used to go to regular functions there. It used to have a bar and a restaurant and a function room, and there was weddings on and all sorts of things. It really was one of the hubs of the community. My family used to stay at the Manor Hotel whenever they were in Windsor. And I know the Gill brothers that own it. And anyway, what happened was, suddenly I discovered that they were going to rent it out to asylum seekers, to the Home Office for asylum seekers to live in, rather. And the whole community in Datchet went absolutely crazy because suddenly weddings were cancelled. There's a little wedding shop opposite the hotel. The local restaurant effectively was closed down. There is an Indian restaurant, but this was the kind of British restaurant where you could get fish and chips. Things like that, that had to close down. And a lot of functions that happened. And really, I wouldn't say the heart of the village was ripped out because they still do have a community centre, but the village was not as good after this place closed down. And I phoned up Sam Gill. I said, Sam, I do not understand why you've shut the hotel. He said, Andre, you have to understand, they've bankrupted me. The government has shut me down during COVID. I've got no money. He said, now, I don't want to destroy this hotel. I don't want to turn it into a migrant hotel. But what they're offering me is the full rack rate. And let me explain what the rack rate is. If you book a hotel on booking.com, you know, normally say it's £150 a night, but you might get it for 90. The rooms are sold at different prices, but the rack rate is what it has up on the wall if you walk in and just pay cash. So they will give you the rack rate for every single room, every single night, 365 days a year. And that's pretty good, but they'll do even better than that. They pay for all the staff, so you sack all your staff and they do all of the refurbishment and organise everything. All that happens is if you have 20 rooms, I don't know how many the Manor Hotel has, you get the money for 20 rooms, 100% occupancy at the end of the month. Wow. And compare that to the potential to go bust. So these people are making off like bandits, but to be fair to them, they were bankrupted by COVID. Now you can say that's the previous government, lib lab con, all the same thing. Basically, the country is officer led. That is to say that the civil servants run the show and the politician's job is just to apologise. So we've seen that. Now think about the dishonesty of Keir Starmer. First of all, and I'm going to go through a couple of points here, but let's say dishonesty number one, when he talks about hotels. He says, we are going to get rid of hotels. So here's how they're doing it. They're buying the hotels. Well, I think that is a willful misunderstanding of what we're talking about, isn't it? Because you're going, well, okay, it's no longer a hotel, this place. It's now officially a hostel. Well, that doesn't make any difference at all. The next piece of remarkable dishonesty is this, and this is going to leave you absolutely shocked. What about this? We're going to reduce the number of small boats. Do you know the deal they've done with France? The deal that they've done with France is very, very simple. Every time the small boats come over, a percentage of them will be sent back to France, a percentage of the people. which sounds a bit odd because if none of them are entitled to be here, I don't get how you work out the percentage. But okay, whatever percent it is, let's call it 50%. I'm making that figure up. So 100 people come over, 50 are sent to France. Yes. And what does France get in exchange? It puts 50 people into the UK via a flight in Paris. What? Andre, you're talking rubbish. No, I am absolutely telling the truth. Once again, the deal is this. We will reduce the total number of people that come to the UK via a small boat by sending some of them back, and we will fly in a commensurate number of people to ensure the numbers are exactly the same. And of course, then we will see the government on TV, we'll see the Prime Minister on TV going, we've cut the total number of people coming on small boats. Yes, you have cut the total number of people coming on small boats, but once again, it's a willful misunderstanding. When people say that they're concerned about small boats, they're not actually concerned about small boats. What they're concerned about is the number of migrants coming to the UK. Sorry, I just stopped for a second there. I thought my microphone wasn't switched on. I've already filmed this video once, so that would be extremely frustrating to be like that. And by the way, just in case you're not sure that this has happened, in the Rwanda deal, and I was shocked when I discovered this, what would happen is for every one person sent over to Rwanda who wasn't entitled to be in the UK, a disabled Rwandan would be given to the United Kingdom. And so if we sent 200 illegal migrants to Rwanda, they would send 200 disabled Rwandans to the United Kingdom. Just an unbelievable thought. So let's just go through very quickly what the government has said about all of this situation, because they have issued a statement, and this was to Talk TV. So listen to this. I'm going to read this press release. This story. Desperate council officers are offering landlords lump sums of cash and full property refurbs in a frantic scramble to get them to house migrants from asylum hotels. Emails seen by Talk TV reveal local authorities are offering 6 months' rent plus deposits up front, and even proposing redecorating the properties if landlords take in asylum seekers on a long-term basis. But there are growing fears that what this will mean is that British people will be thrown out, including children. I saw that example in Windsor. And that is an absolutely obscene thing, because it's not now just prioritising asylum seekers. What you're now doing is literally throwing British people out. And you're not going to believe what a landlord has said. They are insanely over keen. They've rung me a couple of times a week for months, begging me, asking me to take in asylum seekers. They've offered to pay for fire doors. They've offered to pay money in advance. They've offered to put in other basic requirements, and they're responsible for all the maintenance, and they'll cover all the bills as well. I'm so tempted to do this, he says. The National Audit Office is saying that they need to reduce the total cost of asylum seekers in hotels, because at the moment it's £145 a night. A Home Office spokesman said, the last government did this practice. These arrangements with the private rented sector have been in place for years. We have a statutory duty of care to support destitute asylum seekers. We are restoring order to the asylum system and cutting the cost to the taxpayer by reducing the number of people we're required to accommodate through a rapid increase in asylum decision making and the removal of nearly 30,000 people. Well, I think that this is so dishonest, because I'll tell you what, I got a call on my radio show the other day from somebody who was talking about students. Now, I want to tell you something about undergraduates. The average age of an undergraduate is something like 18 3/4. To be considered old as an undergraduate, old, a mature student, you have to be 21. That is because the number of people who go to university aged 40 is really low. I know there's the Open University, but I'm talking about full-time academic courses in places like this. I'm in the LSE tonight for reasons I won't bore you with. The number of people who do that is very small. It's normally 18-year-olds. We have reduced the total number of students by refusing to allow them to bring, as undergraduates, their wife and children. How many of you, when you take your children or grandchildren to university in September, how many of those universities will say, well, you know, this economics course at Bristol used to be full, but now we don't bring in 60-year-olds or 50-year-olds or 40-year-olds. Now we don't bring in people who have to accommodate their 4 kids on the social. Nobody's turning up. Let me tell you something. The University of York has been criticised for taking too many international students, where on the other end of the market, the university, the Metropolitan University in London, was accused of being nothing more than a visa scam and had its powers to issue visas taken away. I'm going to explain why that happened. Because what they were doing was they were accepting tuition fees for the year, and when nobody ever turned up to any of the courses, they didn't expel them. What that meant was you could pay your tuition fees to come in. Now those tuition fees are high, like 20 grand a year, but you can bring the wife and 5 kids and, you know, get yourself accommodated and whatever, and you can work in the illegal market, as can your wife, and get away with it. But obviously you're not turning up to university. It's a complete and total scam. What was the other thing the Home Office did? They'd say that students can work up to 16 hours a week. Students would be paid a tenner an hour, £160, but actually in reality, what they were doing was they were working in Indian or Chinese restaurants full time. That is the dishonesty of the immigration system. And I will tell you something else about the University of York. To go to the University of York as a British student, you need probably 3 A's or 2 A's and a B. To turn up as an international student, you only need a B and 2 C's. Now, what is actually happening here is not good for the economy. We are pushing our own people out of British universities and filling them up with foreigners. So that, first of all, on the legitimate end is a real disgrace. But then on the illegitimate end, what you're actually doing is pushing students out of courses in favour of people who don't actually turn up. They're just there to claim on the social security. 80% of Somalian women who come to the UK do have no intention of getting a job. 60% of Somalian men have never had a job. 70% of social housing in London now goes to people who were born outside the UK. And think about this from a point of fairness and reason. So we already know that if you want a council house, you can't get it if you're a British person. What you have to do is buy one house for yourself and buy one house for the migrant. The reason I say that is because of 40% social housing. Let's call it 50-50. Do the maths more easily. So that means for every house built for somebody buying it, there has to be one that's quote unquote affordable. Well, look, who pays for the affordable house? It's basically the person that buys the house. So not only are your children and grandchildren not entitled to council houses now, they have to buy 2 houses if they want to be accommodated at all. And the end result, of course, is that the working population, the working British population, have to get the train from the outskirts of towns and cities, going past all of the people in the plum housing who are migrants to the United Kingdom. A total of 14% of people who came last year to the United Kingdom said that they'd come here to work. These benefit claimants are unbelievable, but the whammy is even bigger, isn't it? Because now we're throwing people out of private rented accommodation to bring in migrants. We will encourage even more people to come. Let me go back to that example of Datchet. There were people, young men, on their fairly modern iPhones, quite expensive iPhones, and God knows how they got those, because obviously they're destitute according to the Home Office. But what they were doing was they were filming children playing in the park. Now, I don't know why they were filming children playing, and you can say that they were all perverts, and that may well be true, but actually I think it's because they're showing their family and friends how great it is here, how much you can earn by being here, being on the social. Because here is the way the asylum system actually works. Here's how it actually works. You get a knock on the door in a country like Albania, and the people smugglers will say, right, you give us 10 grand, we'll give you it on credit, you just pay back out of the benefits you receive from the United Kingdom, and we'll get you over, you'll be put up in 4-star accommodation. That's why, by the way, there's been so many protests at our old army bases, because if you've promised to pay 10 grand and you've been promised 4-star accommodation and you've not got as good accommodation as your cousin, you're going to go crazy. Of course, we see it from our perspective that these people don't deserve it. From their perspective, they feel like they've paid and they've been offered a service which has not been delivered. Anyway, what they do when they get to Dover is they don't just say, I wish to claim asylum, because bluntly, they won't really ever get asylum. All that will happen is they might be timed out. But what they also say now is they say, I'm a modern day slave. And the remarkable thing that Theresa May brought in as a law, because they have come through that route, because they are an indentured worker that owes 10 grand to the gangmasters, they now are technically modern day slaves and therefore have to be accommodated in the United Kingdom, even if their asylum claim fails. And the way the asylum claims work very simply is this: you get all these lefty law firms and they know their clients don't have a case. What they do is they challenge and challenge and challenge, and they put in appeal after appeal after appeal, dozens of appeals per client. Priti Patel said that we should have vexatious litigant rules extended to the law firms that do this. But in practice, they know that they don't have a case, but they're able to stay anyway. And of course, now when we put people in these accommodation, when we put them in Datchet, when we put them in this nice private rented accommodation, they're sending videos back to their friends and family saying what a marvellous situation it is in Britain, and more of them come. Tony Blair discovered this. In the 1990s, what he did was he had an amnesty for people who are claiming asylum. And then what happened was he said, let's clear the backlog and start again. What happened was, because he had cleared the backlog for so many people, because so many of them had been given right to remain, what the rest of them around the world did, they all contacted their cousins and said to their cousins, if you hang on long enough, you will be allowed to stay in the United Kingdom, and it's a bonanza. 14% of these people have a job, the rest of them are living off the social. And what is the greatest lie of them all? It's what the Home Office say. They turn around and they say, look, what the Treasury say. Look, these migrants are expanding the economy. That is true, but it is also simultaneously untrue. So let's just do the basics here. What happens is you bring another person to Britain and they earn 20 grand a year. That expands the economy by 20 grand, correct? But when you're talking about a migrant, somebody who's 25 needs to earn about 45 grand a year in order to contribute to society. The reason why I say that is because someone who's 25 is likely to either have kids or kids coming soon. Therefore, you need the child benefit, you need them put into education, the council house costs, NHS costs, GPs. Obviously, you use most of your GP services at the beginning of your life and at the end. So all of those costs mean that whilst the 20 grand person expands the economy, makes it bigger, they are a burden to society as well. And so we get poorer as a result. And I think most of us recognise that we have all become poorer in recent years as immigration has increased. The claim that immigration makes the United Kingdom richer is absolute bunkum. So I stand by what I said earlier, that in fact this is a racist attack on the children and young people of this country. They are not being given the opportunities that they should be. They're being turfed out of their homes, and we should not be doing it. Until next time, goodbye.